Hello, hello, everybody. Happy Saturday. I hope you are having a wonderful day. I'm going to talk about peace today. Peace in the streets, peace in your heart, peace in our world. And my name is Dory. This is Cauldron of Crafty Creations. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're on Facebook, why haven't you followed me on YouTube yet? Come on over. That's where all the crafty fun is. This is crafting a healthier, slimmer, more vibrant and active, healthy body for me. And that's how it ties into the crafty cauldron of crafty creations. I am creating a healthier version of myself. And I was driving home today. I went to see a friend who's in a rehab facility. She's dealing with some pretty severe health issues. And I went over to bring her some love and light. And I brought her a daily word book and a pretty card with an angel, and, drew some oracle cards for her, did some Reiki, led her through a healing meditation. We had a wonderful visit. And I was driving home, and I'm in the left lane. I'm pulling up to this light, and I see that there's a cop on the opposite side of the street, and he's on the shoulder, and he's got a flashlight, and he's going like this with the flashlight. And I'm going, what the heck is he trying to signal for us to do? And, I'm like, am I supposed to pull over to the right side? It doesn't look like other people are doing that. There are people in my lane. So I just pull up. I can see there's a cop car blocking. So basically somebody couldn't have turned left. So I ultimately figured out that he was trying to stop people from turning left, to get them out of the left lane. But it was not clear while I was driving in the left lane. And I'm like, what is he trying to do? He's signaling like this with the flashlight. And so I'm not understanding. And then I look behind me, and I see that there's somebody who's in the middle lane, and they're trying to get, they're in the turn lane basically behind me, trying to get into my lane. And there's some space between me and the car ahead of me. So I go ahead and move forward so that there's room for them to get in, and then this cop just gets lit, and he's like charging towards the direction that I'm coming from, right? And he's like, you over, you now, and just like really, really aggressive. And I'm just like, what is happening? And this is when I realized that he is trying to get people not to be in that middle lane. But I'm like, dude, what you're doing is not clear. It's not clear what you're trying to get people to do. And so, I don't know if that person was like trying to disobey you, or more likely they didn't understand what you were trying to tell them to do. It would have made a lot more sense if you stood in that turn line and shepherded people out and made it clear that lane was not, usable. And so part of me wanted to roll down the window and be like, I don't know that they understand what you're saying. But I mean, this is a cop who has gotten, very aggressive. I mean, he's like charging down the street like he's going to literally attack this vehicle that is behind me that's obviously in the wrong lane. And so I'm like, I don't feel safe rolling down the window to let him know, like, hey, I don't know if people understand what you're trying to communicate. And so I didn't do anything. And so I started saying the Ho'oponopono prayer, because that is something that helps bring me peace, and that I know can help, it's, so I've read or listened to, Joe Vitale's Zero Limits, which is about Ho'oponopono, which is a, Hawaiian prayer. And basically, I've also attended some of the trainings that he has done, and with the shaman from Hawaii. And the shaman talks about how if something is happening and you see it happening, or you experience this happening, it is yours to heal with Ho'oponopono. And so like that was the most action that I felt safe taking, and I'm white. Like if it had been somebody who is a person of color, like, yeah, I mean, I was scared of this guy. And yes, I've had trauma perpetrated on me by men who get aggressive and violent. And so like, I recognize that part of that is my trauma response, but also, there are a lot of cops out there doing things to people that is not acceptable. And I wasn't about to challenge this guy who was clearly escalated, right? And so it just made me think as I was driving home, like I'm saying the Ho'oponopono prayer, reflecting on how, because I was talking about this with my friend, is like, how can we bring about peace within ourselves and within our inner circle, and then within our community, in order to have that ripple effect to go out and affect, and bring about peace globally. And, the people who are fighting against what's happening, don't realize, but they're just bringing more of what they're fighting against, because resistance is what brings more of it to you, whereas acceptance lets it flow and move on. And so, just kind of reflecting on that and wanted to talk about it while I'm bouncing today. Because I think, we get caught up in, oh, this is happening a world away. This is happening in Ukraine. This is happening in Israel and Gaza. And what can I do here in the United States? Like, what can I do to make a difference over there? Well, what we can do is find that peace within and do whatever practice it is to bring about peace with ourselves and have peaceful, loving interactions with other people. And so, had it been a different situation, I would have loved to speak up and say, gosh, I don't know if people understand what you're trying to tell them to do. I know I didn't, but it didn't feel safe to do that. And so I did what I did feel safe doing that I know makes a difference. And this Ho'oponopono, I had learned about it before I started teaching. And so when I was teaching, if I would have a particularly rough day with one of my students, that night I would imagine that student and I would say the Ho'oponopono prayer. And inevitably, when I did that the next day, I would have a much better interactions with that kid throughout the day. And then after I had moved home back to Montana, I was working at a job, and this woman that I was working with was clearly very triggered by me. And it was, and this may sound arrogant, but it's not coming from arrogance. It's just coming from a place of like, she could see that I was more intelligent than she was. And so she felt threatened by that. And she was, above me on the hierarchy, whatever. And she would be really, really rude to me. And so I remembered Ho'oponopono. And so I started saying that prayer. And I would literally start like 5 minutes before I get to work. I'm driving to work. I'm like, oh yeah, let me Ho'oponopono. And I'd like imagine her and I would start saying it. And things got better. She started being nicer and not attacking, being so aggressive with me. I'm like, oh, And so I was like, that's working. And then I would say, oh gosh, there's this guy who sits by me and he's really, really loud. And it just, was an assault to me. I've recognized, I've basically diagnosed myself. I have sensory processing issues. I've talked about it a little bit with my psychiatrist, but like I get extremely overwhelmed, especially by sounds and smells. And so I would get really, my nervous system, and I didn't have the vocabulary to explain it. I just knew that I felt like really, on edge when this guy would be talking so loudly, either on the phone or, to the people he was asking for help. And he was, always confused and didn't understand things. And so he's, asking these people, and it was really hard for me to be close to that. And so I was like, oh, wouldn't it be great if they moved him away? And sure enough, it wasn't long before they moved him away. But then the person they moved next to me, she was really, really sweet. I really, really liked her. But she smoked cigarettes, and I am so allergic to cigarettes. And so I was like, okay, what could it look like? And, I was like, wouldn't it be great if she got promoted and moved to another area? And she ended up going on leave because she had some stuff going on. I don't even know details at all, and I wouldn't share them if I did, because obviously it's not my story to tell. But it was just that like, oh, cool. Like I'm asking for stuff and it's happening, and I didn't have any ill intention towards either of them. I was just needed a more regulated, although the guy that they moved in there was literally like, got to the point where the other several of us who sat in that area literally were afraid that this guy was going to come in and pull a gun on us. I mean, because he had pulled a gun on somebody during a traffic stop or during a road rage traffic situation. And he literally like verbally assaulted me multiple times and should have been fired for the swearing that ensued when I was told by my supervisor to correct his mistakes and, or to tell him what he needed to correct and how he needed to correct it. And he would argue with me and I would say to her, and she'd be like, no, you need to go back to him. Cause she was like training me on, having somebody under me, but it was like, he was extremely disrespectful and he had anger issues and his ex was trying to take their child away. And like, as we got to experience some more of his issues, it was like, oh, well, it's clear that there's a reason. She has a good reason for wanting to keep their child away from him. Because literally like he would walk in and I would just like, look at the bag he's carrying. And I'm like, is this the day that he's going to have a gun and go postal on us? And they finally, he was making all these errors. And then I found out that he was getting paid more to make the errors than I was getting paid to teach him how to fix them. And, when I told my boss what he had said after he opened my email before sending the email back, she's like, oh yeah, he should have been fired for that. And I'm like, yeah. And instead of firing him, you and your boss just sat and like de-escalated him and talked him into not quitting. When we've all been saying you need to get rid of this guy because you literally can't find work for him to do that he can actually do correctly. So, and you feel bad for him because his wife is, taking him to court and trying to take their child away when clearly the guy has anger issues. And, they did finally fire him. But when I saw my physical therapist for the injury that I had sustained at work, she goes, clearly working with this guy is making your shoulder issue worse. And so when I finally went to my supervisor with it, and I was like, okay, my physical therapist said this, and she recommended that I go to HR and say this. And she was like, oh, let me try to fix it first. And I did, which was my bad because I should have gone to HR. All those hindsight's 2020, right? But anyway, so all kinds of, I don't know where. Oh, but so looking at, okay, so how are ways that we can make peace in our world? And here I go off on a tangent talking about something very not peaceful. But the point is, when we are in the heat of the moment, often it's hard for us to choose peace. And, it's one thing to like, oh, I can be all peace and rainbows when I'm doing my meditation and I'm all by myself and there's nobody around. There's nobody interrupting me. There's nobody like being aggressive or being rude. But the real challenge, the real work is choosing peace in those moments, in the heat of the moment when you want to roar. And instead you go, okay, I recognize that I'm having a reaction. I recognize that I am triggered. And so I'm going to sit down and look at that. But in this moment, in this conversation, rather than spewing anger and hatred outward, I'm going to say, I need to take a step back. I need some time to reflect. This is not a time to continue this conversation. And then go and do that sacred rage work, because I'm not saying to squelch those feelings. Absolutely not. Like, we absolutely need to feel our feelings and express them. But we need to express them in ways that isn't adding more pain and anger and, confrontation and conflict in the world if we can possibly avoid it. And so, for me, like what happened with the police officer, and I'm like, okay, I don't feel comfortable like approaching him and saying, I don't know if they understand what you're doing. What I did feel comfortable doing was, okay, I'm going to choose peace within me. And I'm going to say the Ho'oponopono prayer, and then I'm going to talk about it on my live, and, things like that, where we can take steps. And then after this, after I go have dinner and, do some other things, I'm going to take some time to journal about this experience and what it brought up in me, because what it triggered in me was an invitation for me to heal something that still needs healing. And so when we can look at these things that trigger us, that upset us, that, put us on edge and have us go, oh, get our hackles up and go, okay, I'm having a reaction. How can I witness myself having this reaction? How can I pull back from, engaging in confrontation, take a step back from that, work through it myself, find my way to peace within me. And if I am able to then go back to that person and have a conversation in peace, then great. And if I'm not, maybe I go into meditation, I have a talk with their higher self, because that's what I'm going to do with that police officer. Because obviously I'm not going to go find that police officer and be like, look, you got upset, blah, blah, blah. And this one, they didn't understand. No, because I don't even know who he is, right? I just know. But what I can do is I can go into meditation and I can go to higher self and I can be like, okay, I want to put this out there. This is what happened. And maybe plant a seed somehow within the subconscious of his higher self to hopefully address that. And of course, I'm going live with it and addressing it here in hopes that my reflection on that will help somebody else choose peace in some way, shape, or form. And, I absolutely get upset by those things. And seeing what's happening in Gaza right now, it just makes me want to just be like, how dare you? How dare you do this to human beings? Like, this is not okay. But I can't, obviously I'm not going to get on a plane and go do that. Right. But what can I do right here? What I can do is I can talk about peace. I can choose peace in my interactions. I can do the Ho'oponopono prayer. I can do my sacred rage and get my anger out about what's actually happening. And then I can write about it and I can journal about it and I can share how others can work through these difficult emotions that are surfacing because of what's happening and send the love and light that's so desperately needed. Because we don't need more angry people with weapons. What we do need is more love and light and people choosing peace. Because when we choose peace within ourselves, and we choose peace within our families and our communities, that's how we make peace on a global scale, is by choosing peace in those moments when it's not easy to do so. So on that note, I hope that you will do something today that sets your soul on fire, brings you joy, that you follow your bliss, and that you choose peace. Take care. I love you all, and I will see you next time. Whoops. If I can click on the end. Go away. It's not letting me end my YouTube video. Bye.